Good evening, students. So welcome to another session. So we've been taking up a series of lectures on the genetic disorders. So initially we started off with the gene-based disorders, and in the previous session we were actually taking up with the gene-based disorders. So under gene-based disorders, we started classifying them into two different categories. One is autosomal gene disorders. Second one is X-linked gene disorders. Under autosomal gene disorders, we again took up two different categories under that. One is called dominant autosomal gene disorders. Second one is recessive autosomal gene disorder. Similarly, with regards to X-linked also, that is sex-linked disorders, we've taken up with dominant X-linked gene disorders as well as the recessive X-linked gene disorders. So through the previous session, we have completely done with the topic called as gene disorders, or rather the Mendelian disorders or inherited disorders. So in this session, we'll be taking up with another type of genetic disorders, which is called as chromosomal genetic disorders, right? So let's begin with today's session by taking up the chromosomal disorders. Chromosomal disorders. So till the previous session, we have done with gene disorders, and from today onwards, let's take up with a few disorders pertaining to chromosomal disorder. So what does this chromosomal disorders mean? Just like what we said with regards to gene disorders, we said that if there is some sort of mutation in the gene present in a specific chromosome, that would lead to a condition called as gene-based disorders. When we talk about chromosomal disorders, again, here there is mutation happening in the chromosome itself. So if you could recollect what we have seen in the previous sessions when we were talking about a concept called as mutations, even in mutations also we started classifying mutations into two broad categories. One was gene mutation and the other one was chromosomal mutation. Right. Under gene mutation, what did we see? If there is some sort of changes occurring in the gene present on a specific chromosome, we started calling it as gene mutation. When we took up with chromosomal mutation, I told you that chromosomal mutation, there is some sort of changes happening either in the structure of chromosome or in the number of chromosomes. So if there is changes happening in the structure of chromosome, we started calling it as structural mutation, or rather morphological mutations. Right. Whereas if there is change in the number of chromosomes, again, we classified them into two major categories. One is called euploidy. The second one is called aneuploidy. So in euploidy, we said that there is increase in a complete set of chromosomes. That's where we pick up with the examples such as haploid, diploid, triploid, tetraploid, polyploid, and so on. Right. Whereas in case of aneuploidy, either there is loss or gain of either one or two chromosomes. So if there is either loss or gain of either one or two chromosomes, such type of mutations we started calling it as numeric mutation. Aneuploidy type of numeric mutation, or we also called it as aneuploidy type of genomic mutation. So any sort of mutations leading to change in the structure of chromosome or increase or decrease in the number of chromosomes would lead to the condition called as chromosomal disorder, right? So what exactly is this chromosomal disorder? Any mutations leading to the change in the structure of chromosome or either loss or gain of a chromosome will lead to this sort of conditions called as chromosomal disorders, right? So these chromosomal disorders also, like what we have seen in the beginning of this topic, when we started off with genetic disorders, we made a clear classification there. We in turn classified chromosomal disorders into two categories again. One was called autosomal chromosomal disorder, and the third one is allosomal chromosomal disorder. So let us first begin with autosomal chromosomal disorder, right? And then we'll get into allosomal chromosomal disorder. But before we actually get into this autosomal chromosomal disorder, a few important things what you need to remember with regards to the chromosomal disorder. The first thing, chromosomal disorders are usually referred to as syndromes, right? So we usually call the disorders as syndromes. So we have different types of syndrome, or rather different syndromes, what we'll be taking up in detail in this particular session, right? So almost all of the chromosomal disorders are referred to as a syndrome. Now, what does a syndrome mean? A syndrome is nothing but a group of diseases or a group of symptoms rather consistently seen together. So what is a syndrome? Syndrome is nothing but a group of symptoms, right? A group of symptoms consistently seen together or consistently they occur together, right? So if a group of syndrome, if they are consistently seen occurring together, then we start calling it as a syndrome. So not just one symptom is seen. So there are a group of symptoms which are seen together in these sorts of conditions, right? So when we take a few examples, you'll get a clear picture of why we actually call it as a syndrome, right? So almost all of the chromosomal disorders, right? Almost all of the chromosomal disorders, we start calling them as syndrome. The first thing what you need to remember, right? The next thing what you need to remember is most of the chromosomal disorders, right? Most of the chromosomal disorders is due to a process called as non-disjunction of chromosomes, right? So most of the chromosomal disorders is due to the process called as non-disjunction of chromosomes. So what is this non-disjunction of chromosomes? This is very important one, what you need to remember, right? So most of the chromosomal disorders are usually because of the non-disjunction of chromosome. So what is this non-disjunction of chromosome? What does this actually mean? If you could recollect the process of cell division, what you have studied earlier, either mitosis or meiosis, right? So what exactly happens in this particular process of cell division is, during the metaphase stage, we know that all the chromosomes will start aligning themselves on the equatorial plate, what we also call it as the metaphase plate. So once the chromosomes align themselves on the equatorial plate, what is the next stage that is seen here, or what is the next change that happens to the chromosomes that is present in the cell? There is formation of spindle fibers from both the ends from the centrioles, right? Now these spindle fibers will start pulling the chromatids towards the opposite poles during the process of cell division. So that happens in the phase called as anaphase 1, right? So, or rather anaphase, we can take it as anaphase. So here there is one chromosome and here there is one chromatid. We can take it as a chromatid. So one chromatid and the other chromatid, they have aligned themselves on the equatorial plate. The next thing is there is formation of spindle fibers, and these spindle fibers will start pulling these chromatids towards the opposite poles, right? So this process of movement of chromatids during the opposite poles during the anaphase stage of cell division, we start calling it as disjunction, right? So we use the term called as disjunction here. Disjunction is nothing but the segregation of chromatids, or rather chromosomes, right? So the process of segregation of chromatids during the process of cell division, which occur in anaphase stage, is what we call it as disjunction, right? I hope all are clear with this disjunction. Now we are using a term called as non-disjunction. So what does that mean? Non-disjunction is nothing but failure of the chromatids or the chromosomes to segregate during the process of cell division, right? So what is non-disjunction? The failure of chromatids to segregate during the process of cell division is what we call it as non-disjunction, right? So what happens if there is non-disjunction happening? If there is normal disjunction happening, when we talk about a process called mitosis, if there is normal disjunction happening, this is one cell and this is one cell. So at the end of mitosis, each cell will have one chromosome each if there is disjunction of chromosomes happening. But if there is non-disjunction of chromosomes, right? If there is non-disjunction of chromosome, what would be the condition now? These two are not getting segregated or separated, as a result of which one cell will have both the chromosomes or chromatids, and this cell will not have anything, right? This cell will not have anything. Now, if this cell, consider this to be a gametic cell, right? Let us consider this to be a female gamete, right? So this female gamete having two chromosomes here, when it fuses with the male gamete having one chromosome here, what would be the condition now? This cell or the zygote here will start having 3 chromosomes here. That's how the chromosomal disorders are. Most of the chromosome disorders are usually seen, right? So most of the chromosomal disorders is because of the process called as non-disjunction of chromosomes. So two important things what you need to remember whenever you talk about chromosomal disorders. The first one is all of the chromosomal disorders, we start calling them as syndromes. So why do we call them as syndromes? It is because they usually are seen as a group of symptoms which are consistently occur together, right? So since a group of symptoms consistently occur together, we start calling it as a syndrome. Second thing what you need to know is most of the chromosomal disorders, I'm not telling all, but I'm using the term called most. Most of the chromosomal disorders are because of non-disjunction of chromosomes during the process of gamete formation. So what is this non-disjunction of chromosomes? Failure of the chromosomes to segregate during the process of cell division, right? Since there is failure of chromosomes or failure of chromosomes to segregate during the process of cell division, one cell itself will have 2 chromosomes and the other cell will not have any of the chromosomes. So this will again lead to either loss of one chromosome or gain of one chromosome. So if the male gamete fuses with this particular female gamete having 2 chromosomes, there is gain of one chromosome here, right? If the male gamete fuses with this female gamete without any chromosome, there will be a loss of one chromosome here, right? So most of the chromosomal disorders are caused due to non-disjunction of chromosomes. One more important thing here. Now, the reason for non-disjunction of chromosomes is, right, one of the major reason for non-disjunction of chromosomes is the process of late pregnancies, right? Due to late pregnancies, right? So if the female individuals conceive late during her lifetime, right, at that point of time, the spindle fibers would not be formed properly, as a result of which there is failure of segregation happening. So most of the late conceiving women, or rather most of the late pregnancies, would usually lead to this condition called non-disjunction of chromosomes, and the child would actually be born with these sort of chromosomal disorders, right? So 3 things what you need to remember whenever we talk about this particular chromosomal disorder. First one is it is a syndrome. Almost all the chromosomal disorders are referred to as syndrome. So what is a syndrome? A group of symptoms, right? A group of symptoms consistently occurring together. We start calling it as a syndrome. Second one is most of the chromosomal disorders is because of non-disjunction of chromosomes. So what is this non-disjunction? Failure of chromosomes to segregate during the process of cell division. That is what we call it as non-disjunction. And what could be the reason for non-disjunction? It would be mostly the late pregnancies, right? So this is what we have an introductory note about chromosomal disorder. Now let's start taking up with a few disorders, right? So let us begin with the first type of chromosomal disorders, which is called as autosomal chromosomal disorders. Then we'll get into allosomal chromosomal disorders, right? So the first disorder what we are going to take up in the list would be autosomal chromosomal disorders. Autosomal disorders, or rather autosomal chromosomal disorders. So under this, the first disorder what we're going to take up is called as Down's syndrome. So as I've already said, right, all the genetic disorders, that is chromosomal disorders, would be referred to as syndrome, right? So the first disorder what we have in the list, right, pertaining to autosomal disorder would be this Down's syndrome. So let us take up with Down syndrome and see what's happening in case of Down syndrome, right? So there are other names given for Down syndrome. So first take down those names, then we'll get into the details of this, right? Down syndrome is also called as Mongolism, or it is also called as Mongolian idiocy, right? It is called Mongolian idiocy, or it is also called Mongolism, right? So this disorder called Down syndrome was first identified by a scientist by name Langdon Down, right? So he was the first one to identify this disorder. the scientist named Langdon Down. So he gave his own name to describe this particular disorder. So we start calling it as Down's syndrome. Now, what is the cause of this particular Down syndrome? Excuse me. Yeah. So what is the cause of this Down syndrome? Down syndrome is referred to as a condition called trisomy. It is referred to a condition called as trisomy. So what does this trisomy mean? So if you could recollect when we were talking about mutations, we saw all of this, right? Nullisomy, monosomy, trisomy, all that we have seen at that particular time. So what is this trisomy? We usually refer to it as 2n+1 condition, right? This is how we refer to trisomy, right? 2n+1 condition is trisomy. So this Down syndrome is because of trisomy. Since there is one trisomy means what? There is one additional chromosome present in the autosomes, right? So therefore we start referring to it as trisomy, right? So where exactly is the trisomy seen? Trisomy is seen in the 21st pair of, right? It is usually seen in the 21st pair of autosomes. Therefore, Down syndrome is also referred to as trisomy 21. So what does this mean? Trisomy 21, in the 21st pair of autosome, there is one additional chromosome or additional 21st chromosome being present, right? So in the 21st pair of autosome, there are 3 chromosomes present, right? And what is the reason for this sort of a disorder? It is again due to non-disjunction, right? It is again due to non-disjunction of chromosomes. Right, so due to non-disjunction of chromosomes during gamete formation, right? So this 21st pair, one of the 21st pair will have 2 chromosomes, the other 21st pair will not have any chromosome at all, right? So when this 21st pair of chromosome having 2 chromosomes, right, when it fuses or fertilizes with the normal gamete of the other sex, so there are 3 chromosomes seen in the 21st pair. So that's what leads to this disorder called as Down syndrome. So what exactly is happening in the Down syndrome? There is one additional chromosome present on the 21st autosome. So we usually refer to as 2n+1 condition. So if you have to give the karyotype of this particular individual suffering from Down syndrome, so how do we give the karyotype of this individual? Right, so karyotype is given as, so total there are 47 chromosomes, right? There are 47 chromosomes, of which in bracket, right? So we can use this here, or rather we can put it like this: trisomy in bracket 47 chromosomes in total, because there is one extra chromosome, right? Then there are, it could be either female XX chromosome, or it could be a male with X and Y chromosome. Then there is plus. Plus indicates addition of one extra chromosome. Where is that addition seen? In the 21st pair. So this is how we give the karyotype of individuals of the suffering from Down syndrome, right? So how do we designate the karyotype given for Down syndrome? Trisomy in bracket total number of chromosomes. So the total number of chromosomes here is said to be 47 chromosomes, right? These are the allosomes. So it could be either seen in case of males or in case of females. So here we have written it as X and X. So that indicates that it is a female individual, right? Followed by plus sign. Plus sign indicates addition of one extra chromosome. And where is that one extra chromosome? Is the last number that is given. So plus 21 designates that there is one additional chromosome present on the 21st pair of autosomes, right? So the major reason for this Down syndrome is non-disjunction of chromosomes. And I also told you that at the beginning of the class. What could be the reason for this non-disjunction of chromosome? The reason could be, one of the major reasons would be late pregnancies, conceiving late during the lifetime of that particular female individual, right? So this is what we have with Down syndrome. Now, what are the symptoms that are associated with Down syndrome? When a child is born with this particular condition, right, what will the effects be seen, or what sort of effects or what sort of conditions would be seen in the child suffering from this sort of a disorder. So let us take up with the symptoms associated with this particular disorder called the Down syndrome. The first one, these individuals have short stature, right? So these individuals have short stature. So when we say short stature, the height is said to be very short. These individuals will be very, very short. The second one is these individuals will have a small, they have a small round head, right? The head will be very small and it would be small and it would be a rounded head is seen, right? Then these individuals will have a flat face, right? So these individuals also have a flat face. The face would be flattened, right? And at the back also, in the neck region also, it would be a flattened part, right? Then these individuals suffering from Down syndrome always have their mouth partially open, right? So always the mouth is said to be partially open, right? So the mouth is always partially open in this individual. Why the mouth is partially open again? Because they have a big, right? They have a big and furrowed, they have big and furrowed tongue, right? So because they have a big and furrowed tongue, so what does this furrowed mean? Some sort of wrinkles are actually seen on the tongue. So they have a big tongue, wrinkled tongue, because of which the mouth is always said to be partially open, right? So these are some of the conditions. A few more conditions associated with Down syndrome is, right? Down syndrome is these individuals have broad palms, right? So these individuals have broad palms and they have characteristic palm grease, right? They have characteristic palm grease, right? So they have broad palm as well as characteristic palm grease. And along with this, these individuals also suffer from something called as congenital heart disorders, congenital heart diseases. That is some sort of inborn diseases related to the heart, right? So they have abnormal heart formation, what we call it as congenital heart disease. So by birth itself, this individual will have some abnormalities in the heart. And along with that, they also have physical, right? Physical, reproductive, as well as mental retardation. So these are some of the symptoms, or rather conditions, which are actually associated with Down syndrome, right? Since all of these disorders, or rather all of these symptoms are seen grouped and they consistently occur in that particular individual, we start calling this as a symptom, right? So what are the disorders, or rather what are the symptoms that are seen in this particular individual? They have short stature, small round head, flat face, mouth is always partially open. Why is the mouth always partially open? Because of the big and wrinkled or furrowed tongue that is being present. They have broad palms of the hands and they have characteristic palm grease on their hands, right? Then they suffer from congenital heart diseases, and also they are said to be physically, reproductively, and mentally retarded, right? So they are retarded. The growth, physical as well as mental as well as reproductive growth, is said to be highly retarded. One more thing also is usually seen, right? So they have loops in the fingertips, right? So there are several loops in fingertips, right? So these are the conditions that are seen associated with this particular disorder called as the Down syndrome, right? So what happens in the Down syndrome? So Down syndrome is actually designated as trisomy 21. So when we say trisomy 21, there is one extra chromosome present in the 21st pair of autosome. So it is also called as Mongolism, or it is also called as Mongolian idiocy, right? Which was first identified by a scientist by name Langdon Down. So the karyotype, how we denote this particular Down syndrome, the karyotype is important here. So you need to remember the karyotype. So it is designated as trisomy, which indicates that there is one additional chromosome. Since there is one additional chromosome, the total number of chromosomes in this particular individuals will be 47, and followed by the sex of the individual, whether it is male or a female. Here we can take it as either XX or we can take it as XY, because both males and females are equally affected, followed by comma, then there is a plus sign. Plus indicates that there is an addition of an extra chromosome. And where is that extra chromosome present? Usually present on the 21st pair of autosomes, right? So that's how we start denoting the karyotype of this individual, right? Suffering from Down syndrome. And the major reason for this Down syndrome is non-disjunction of chromosomes during the process of segregation or during the process of gamete formation. One of the major reasons for non-disjunction of chromosome would be late pregnancies, right? So what are some of the symptoms that are associated with Down syndrome? Short stature, short height. They have small round head, flat face, mouth is partially open. They have big and furrowed tongue. They have broad palms in their hand, and also have characteristic palm crease. They suffer from congenital heart disorder, that is, they are actually born with heart-related abnormalities. Then they are said to be physically, reproductively, and mentally retarded. So the development is said to be retarded. It is said to be very, very slow. They also have low IQ values, and there are loops in the fingertips, right? So this is the first type of disorder what we have pertaining to autosomal disorder, which is known as the Down syndrome, or rather we call it as trisomy 21, right? So this is what we have with Down syndrome. So now let us take up with the second type of disorder, right? Let us take up with the second type of disorder. The second type of disorder under this category would be termed as Edwards syndrome, right? So the second disorder is referred to as the Edwards syndrome, right? It was first identified by a scientist by name Edwards, so therefore he had given his name. It is termed as Edwards syndrome. So the second disorder in the list, what we have is Edwards syndrome. So Edwards syndrome is also a trisomy condition. It is again because of aneuploidy, right? So Edwards syndrome is also trisomy, and this time trisomy is seen in 18th chromosome or 18th pair of chromosomes. So Down syndrome, it was trisomy 21. Here, when we talk about Edwards syndrome, it is trisomy 18, right? So what again happens in Edwards syndrome? There is one extra chromosome, right? There is one additional chromosome present in the 18th pair of autosomes. So the 18th pair of chromosomes will have 3 chromosomes, with 1 chromosome being additional. And again, the reason for Edwards syndrome would be again the same thing. It is because of non-disjunction of chromosomes, right? It is because of non-disjunction of chromosomes during the process of gamete formation, right? So when we have to determine the karyotype of this individuals, right? So how do we determine the karyotype of this particular individual? First, it is trisomy, right? So this is usually seen as it is trisomy. There are 47 chromosomes, right? So this particular disorder, that is Edwards syndrome, is most commonly seen in case of females rather than in males. So you have to make a note of this, right? Edwards syndrome is mostly seen in case of females rather than in males. Okay, so we have designated it as XX. Now, since there is trisomy, it would be plus, and where there is one extra chromosome on the 18th pair, right? So this would be the karyotype of the Edwards syndrome. Trisomy 47, XX plus 18. So that's how we start designating the karyotype for Edwards syndrome. So as I've already said, these particular individuals suffering from Edwards syndrome, right? So it is usually seen in case of females more rather than the males, right? Again, what is the reason for this? One presence of one additional chromosome present on the 18th pair of autosomes, right? So this is what we call it as Edwards syndrome. Now, right. Now, these individuals usually suffer from cardiac abnormalities. They suffer from cardiac abnormalities. So what does this mean? Cardiac abnormalities. They usually suffer from heart-related disorders, right? So most of these individuals suffering from Down syndrome usually suffer from cardiac abnormalities, that is heart-related disorders, and also with kidney malfunction, right? With kidney malfunction. So what does this mean? Kidney malfunction. The kidneys are not functioning properly. Improper functioning of the kidneys. The kidneys are not able to do their work properly. Right? So two most prominent conditions associated with Edwards syndrome is cardiac abnormalities as well as kidney malfunction. So because of these two major abnormalities that are seen in this individual, these individuals usually die during the fetus stage itself. Right? So they usually die. Majority of the cases, individuals suffering from Edwards syndrome would usually die during the early developmental stages itself. Once all the organs have been formed, since these two major organs are not functioning properly, they usually die at the fetal stage itself. So if at all that fetus survives, right? If at all the fetus is born or the child is born, that child will start suffering from these two conditions again predominantly, and will not be able to survive more than a few days or a few weeks after the child is born, right? So they'll not survive more than a few days or a few weeks, right? So they have very, very little lifespan, hardly in case of days or rather a few weeks, right? So that is what is associated with Edwards syndrome, trisomy 8. So the third disorder what we have in the list is called as Patau's syndrome. P-A-T-A-U, right? It is called as Patau's syndrome. So Patau's syndrome is also a trisomy condition. So Patau's syndrome is also trisomy condition, right? And here the trisomy is, it is trisomy 13, right? So Down syndrome was trisomy 21. Edwards syndrome is trisomy 18 and Patau syndrome is trisomy 30. So again, what would be the condition here? The same thing what we have seen. There is one additional chromosome present where now? On the 13th pair of autosomes, right? So there is one additional chromosome present on the 13th pair of autosome, and that condition we start calling as Patau syndrome. The reason for this, again, the same reason, non-disjunction of chromosomes during gamete formation. So if we have to give the karyotype of this individuals, how do we designate it again? It is trisomy. So since it is trisomy, 47 chromosomes, it could be seen both in case of males as well as females. So XX or XY, and plus symbol is used because there is addition of one extra chromosome. And where is that addition seen? In the 13th chromosome. So this would be the karyotype of this particular individuals suffering from Patau's syndrome. Right. Now, what again happens in this Patau syndrome? We have said that Patau syndrome is majorly caused because of an additional chromosome present on the 13th pair of autosomes. Right. So therefore, total of 47 chromosomes are usually present in these individuals. Right. So unlike Edwards syndrome, where it is predominantly seen in case of females, Patau syndrome is seen in both males as well as females. So individuals with this condition, right? Individuals with this condition usually suffer from cardiac abnormalities again, right? So they suffer from cardiac abnormalities, right? And they also have kidney malfunction, right? So kidneys are not functioning properly. So there is kidney malfunction. And along with that, the brain and spinal cord are also not functioning properly. So abnormalities in brain and spinal cord also. Abnormalities in brain as well as spinal cord. So since there is abnormalities in brain as well as spinal cord, the mental development of this individuals is said to be highly retarded, and these individuals will usually be mentally retarded. they would be mentally retarded. Right? So we usually consider this as individuals having intellectual as well as physical abilities are said to be highly retarded. Right? So the intellectual ability is retarded. Similarly, the physical abilities of this individuals are also said to be retarded. Right? Now, because the individual suffers from all of this condition, again, these individuals will have a very, very small lifespan. Right? So they also usually die within a few days or rather a few weeks after they are born. Very much similar to Edward syndrome. Right? So these individuals will not survive for a longer period of time. Their lifespan is very, very short. They usually survive for very few days to rather very few weeks, and then the child would die because of all of these abnormalities that are associated with this particular condition. Right? So this is what we have with the third disorder called Patau syndrome. So till now we have taken up 3 disorders. Right? All 3 disorders are something related to aneuploidy type of mutation where there is addition of one extra chromosome. Right? So first in Down syndrome, we call it as trisomy 21, Edward syndrome, trisomy 18, and Patau syndrome, trisomy 30. Right? Now let's take up with one more disorder now. Right? Let us take up with one more disorder. Right? And this disorder is referred to as something called as Cri-du-chat syndrome. Right? It is referred to as Cri-du-chat syndrome. So this is not because of trisomy. This is because of deletion type of mutation. Right? So the fourth one, what we have here, is called as Cri-du-chat syndrome. Right? It is referred to as Cri-du-chat syndrome. Right? So this is the next disorder what we have, which is called as Cri-du-chat syndrome. So what is this Cri-du-chat syndrome all about? So this sort of a disorder is mostly because of a deletion type of mutation. Right? So there is deletion happening. I hope all are familiar with the term called deletion. Right? So what happens in deletion? A part of the chromosome breaks off from the normal chromosome. If a part of the chromosome breaks off, that type of mutation we start calling it as deletion type of mutation. Here also, the same deletion type of mutation is actually seen. So where is this deletion happening? Deletion is happening in the short arm of chromosome number 5. Right? So deletion is happening in the short arm of chromosome number 5. So we know that each chromosome has 2 arms, P arm and Q arm. Right? So we have one short arm and a long arm. Right? So short arm is usually referred to as P arm and long arm is usually referred to as Q arm. Right? So here, because of deletion in the short arm of chromosome number 5, the child would be suffering from this condition called as Cri-du-chat syndrome. So what happens in this Cri-du-chat syndrome is, right? What happens in this Cri-du-chat syndrome is, Cri-du-chat is actually derived from a French word. Right? So Cri-du-chat is derived from a French word which means as cat-like cry. Right? So Cri-du-chat means cat-like cry. So what does this mean now? So the child suffering from this sort of a deletion in the 5th arm of chromosome, in the 5th short arm of chromosome number 5, will have a cat-like cry. Right? A cat-like cry. Because there is cat-like cry, it has been termed as Cri-du-chat syndrome. Right? So what is the condition of this particular, or how do we designate the karyotype of this particular individuals? So how do we designate the karyotype of this individuals? So the chromosome number is constant, so there is no trisomy or no monosomy or nullisomy. So chromosome number is constant, so the chromosome number is 46 here as usual. So it could be seen in case of both males as well as females. So it could be either XX or it could be XY. So equally seen in case of both males and females. Right? Now, what is the condition? There is deletion in the short arm of chromosome number 5. So short arm of chromosome number 5 is denoted as the P arm. Right? So we usually refer it as 5P. That shows that in the short arm, that is P arm of chromosome number 5, there is deletion happening. So how do we designate deletion? By using a minus. So this is how we refer to the karyotype. 46, XX, 5P minus. So therefore, Cri-du-chat syndrome is also called as 5p minus syndrome. Just like what we said, trisomy 21, trisomy 18, as well as trisomy 13, here we refer to as at 5p minus syndrome. Right? So this is what we have with Cri-du-chat syndrome. Now, why do the child cry like a cat? Right? Why do the child cry like a cat? This is mostly because of abnormalities seen in the larynx. That is, we know that larynx is the sound producing box or sound producing organs in our body. We also start calling it as the voice box, right? So the sound in our body is being produced whenever we talk is because of the organ called as larynx, right? So due to abnormalities in the larynx, right? So there would be a cat-like cry. Along with that, there are abnormalities in the right? There are several abnormalities seen in the nervous system, right? In brain as well as the spinal cord, right? So there are several abnormalities seen either in the brain as well as spinal cord. So due to abnormalities in the larynx as well as the brain and the spinal cord, the child would start crying like a child. Sorry, the child will start crying like a cat. Therefore, we start calling it as cat-like cry or Cri-du-chat syndrome. Right? So these individuals also will not survive for a longer period of time. They usually die during the early childhood. Right? So they usually die during early childhood. So this is what we have with another autosomal disorder, autosomal chromosomal disorder, which is called as the Cri-du-chat syndrome. So what is happening in this Cri-du-chat syndrome? There is a deletion happening in the short arm of chromosome number 5. Therefore, we refer to it as 5p minus, right? So deletion is nothing but breakage of the part of chromosome is happening. So because of this breakage or rather deletion, right, there is abnormalities in the larynx as well as the abnormalities in the brain and the spinal cord. Because of abnormalities seen in the larynx as well as the brain and the spinal cord, the individual or the child will start crying like a cat. Therefore, it has been termed, or this disorder is termed as cat-like cry, or it is also called as Cri-du-chat syndrome. Right? So how do we designate the karyotype of this? Karyotype is designated as 46XX5p minus, indicating that the chromosome number is constant, 46 chromosomes. It could be seen in case of both males as well as females. So here we have given it with regards to females, and 5p represents the short arm of chromosome number 5, and minus would represent the deletion type of mutation happening there. Right? So because of this condition, these individuals will usually die during the early childhood. Right? So this is what we have with another type of disorder, which is called as Cri-du-chat syndrome. So we have taken up with 4 disorders in this session. Right? First one, we started off with autosomal disorders. Under autosomal disorders, we have taken up with 4 types of disorders. First one is the Down syndrome, where there is one additional chromosome present on the 21st pair of autosomes. And the reason for that is something called as non-disjunction of chromosomes during the process of gamete formation. Right? And along with that, we have already also seen that, right, Down syndrome results in intellectual disability as well as physical development is also said to be retarded. So what are the symptoms that are associated with Down syndrome? That also we have taken up, right? So pertaining to the symptoms, the individual's height is said to be very short, right? So they have a broad face, right? They have a very small round head, and along with that, mouth is said to be partially open because they have a big furrowed or wrinkled tongue that is being present, right? Then they have broad palms with characteristic palm grease present, and they have loops on the fingertips. Along with that, they usually suffer from something called as congenital heart disorders, and along with that, their physical, mental, and reproductive abilities are said to be highly retarded. So those individuals are said to be mentally retarded. That's what we have seen with the Down syndrome. Second disorder what we took up is Edwards syndrome. Edwards syndrome is again designated as trisomy 18. So in the 18th pair of autosome, there is one additional chromosome or autosome that is being present, right? Therefore, leading to a condition called as trisomy, right? And as we have already said, Edwards syndrome is usually seen more in case of females than in case of males. So those sort of individuals would suffer from cardiac abnormalities, heart-related problems, as well as kidney malfunction also, due to which those individuals usually die during the fetal stage itself. So if at all that individual is born, the child would be mentally retarded and usually die at very early childhood days, very early. Right? Third disorder what we saw is with regards to the Patau syndrome, which we also called it as trisomy 13. Right? So in Patau syndrome, trisomy 13, we said that there is one additional chromosome present on the 13th pair of chromosomes. So here also, these individuals would suffer from heart-related abnormalities, kidney malfunction, brain and spinal cord related abnormalities, as a result of which these individuals usually die during the first few days after birth, or rather first few weeks after their birth. And those individuals also would be mentally retarded. The next disorder what we saw is Cri-du-chat syndrome, what we designated it as 5p minus. So this is because of some sort of deletion happening in the short arm of chromosome number 5. So because of this deletion, what would happen? A part of the short arm of chromosome number 5 breaks off, as a result of which this individual would suffer from abnormalities related to larynx, as well as abnormalities related to the brain as well as spinal cord, because of which the cry of this particular child would be a cat-like cry. Therefore, we start calling it as Cri-du-chat syndrome. Right? So these individuals, they also usually die during the early childhood days. Right? So 4 disorders we have taken up with regards to autosomal disorder. So we have one more disorder, which is called as chronic myeloid leukemia, which is also referred to as a type of cancer, which is again related to the autosomal chromosomal disorder. So that we'll take up in the next session, and along with that, we'll take up with a few allosomal disorders also in the next session. Fine. Thank you.